What happens when you have no regulation for financial advice? You create a country of savers and not investors. India is one such example. My guest today is Sucheta Dalal. She's an award winning journalist and activist, and she's a proponent of investor protection and financial literacy. We ask her why she thinks Indians are savers and not investors. Sucheta Dalal, welcome to the program.
Right. Thanks.
There was a capital market summit organized by FICCI recently, and there was a lot of lament over there that Indians are more of savers and not investors. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, with your work, extensive work that you have done for so many years, what is your assessment of that?
First of all, my lament for the last 3 years has been that when people like Vicky and CII and others have their meetings, or even when Amphi has their meetings, not even in the last panel discussion at the end of the program do they have one stakeholder who represents the investor. So if there's a gathering of people who have nothing to do with the investor, don't ever talk to them except when they're hard selling something, who are they to even discuss what the guy is or what the woman is? I mean, are they lamenting the fact that they haven't been able to hard sell some crap and they have turned smart enough not to buy it? Because what is the distinction between an investor and a saver? Ultimately, all of us are savers primarily because we are keeping that money for our post retirement or whatever. Even when you say investor, what is the purpose of your investment, right? Even if you want to grow rich, you want to earn more, it is ultimately so that you are able to spend, so that you have money for your retirement. So I don't think there's even a distinction. If they say you're not investing in the products we are selling you, but you are keeping your money safe somewhere else, then they need to talk to these people. They need to talk to you and me and ask us why we are doing this. And we have our answers. If anyone wants to speak to us, we will give them a list of things that worry us.
And by and large, the public really knows. In India, people tend to, put a lot of money in gold and property, and they really are aware that other assets are risky. Just that they don't know a lot of stuff, so they steer clear of it. Do you think it's also a combination of the fact that awareness is not significant in India, that people don't really go towards investing and try to kind of save for the rainy day all the time?
See, I think you need to look at the life cycle, okay? So those of my generation, we in 91, 92, when we were just in a position to start saving, the economy opened up. And, unlike our parents who were able to get their house towards their retirement and even used part of their provident fund, we had things like HDFC and we could take a loan and buy a place. So in fact, even someone like me, I keep saying the first 10 to 15 years of my life, there was absolutely no saving. There was only EMI, right? And you started thinking, so there's no question you had to have that roof on your head because property in India was re-rating in that whole decade. And property prices were going up so fast that if you were daft enough not to have invested in a place, you would not be able to afford rentals. Okay. And we also have this weird situation in India where the rentals are very high for a salaried person unless your company is able to pay it. And so you had more and more and more tax breaks on your home loan. So it made just such eminent sense from every perspective. You got a tax break, you ultimately had the roof on your head. So a lot of times we made a simple calculation. You're getting a tax break, you're paying an EMI which would be equal to the rent that you would pay somewhere. And eventually, even if interest rates were extremely high, which they have been in India, eventually you have that roof on your head. And I think this continued until, say, 5 or 10 years ago. So the discussion that we have about investor saver, where we compare ourselves to maybe the developed world, and America, where they have zero savings and they have a lot of debt, will start now. Because again, people my generation, there we have a flat. So if we had children, we had something. So these children don't necessarily have to have that roof on their head. Okay, they probably have their parents' flat. In fact, I know so many people where they have the parents have invested in two flats. Okay, so the child doesn't really need it unless he wants to do it as a saving. So these are the people who are looking at different things, and they are, because you wouldn't have this phenomenal growth in mutual fund AUMs if it wasn't for these children also putting their money into the capital market through mutual funds.
But phenomenal from a relative position is understandable. But you're still just talking about really something like 2 crore investors in a country of 130 crore people. So whatever hard sell you mentioned earlier, it's not really worked actually on the ground, isn't it?
We're talking about 2 crore investors as an
2
equity.
crore mutual fund, unique mutual fund folios. There are 8 crore total folios, but if you talk to industry people, they'll tell you that one individual has 4 folios on an average. So there are just about 2 crore unique investors in India, in a country of 130 crore people. So that hard sell has not really worked, and that's probably because there was never any incentive, I guess, for people
No,
to
so then
take.
if you eliminate different segments, okay, so you have the really senior citizens where most of them will still want to keep their money safe in a bank deposit because they don't want the risk. Then you have the poor, which is a large chunk. So let's not look at, we have to look at the middle class population. And even among them, there is a whole aspirational class, which is people who are, who are the first people in their families who have probably gone to engineering college or become graduates. So for them, the consideration about roof on the head is still an important thing, right? So I think there's a life cycle. Devashish, who's the editor of Money Life, did a study taking data from ET Wealth, okay, and where they used to sort out people's issues and looked at how their wealth is distributed. And what he did is he took their data week after week, put it in an Excel sheet, and had somebody analyze it. And we discovered that even today, the biggest chunk of your savings goes into your home loan, right? So I think your numbers are going to remain small until that need is met. And we know that there is phenomenal pending demand, and people are going further and further away. We are lucky we had this explosion in Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, so people were able to at least afford something. But that first concern about the roof on the head is a very Indian thing, and having some amount of gold, whether it is for social, religious, or saving, so it combines all three. And we as Money Life and Money Life Foundation tended to be a little sarcastic about people investing so much in gold. But I think the more we studied it, and Devashish has again done a lot of studies, what we discovered is India is peculiar in the kind of cycles it has had. So we've never seen a huge decline in gold prices ever. Okay, so in the last, I think he's looked at more than 30 years or 40 years data. So when you, for whatever reason, so either the rupee is weakening and the dollar is getting stronger. So one way or the other, our gold prices have remained high, right? Whether it's because, and it may be pure luck, this may not continue, but it has happened. And so when you've had this data, it is impossible for you to convince anybody not to buy gold. So the only thing that we advise people is that if you're buying gold, buy physical gold, because the minute you convert that gold into a paperless asset, the tendency is that you want to speculate on it. So while a lot of people say don't keep gold at home, we say that it meets your social needs, and uh, you want to make your wife happy, she wants to wear new jewelry. So, and Indians did think like this, okay, it served two purposes: that you gave gold in marriages because it was a kind of saving, it was part of Sridhan. It's been abused over a period of time, but it acted as a saving. But it is difficult to convince people that it's just a matter of chance that we've never had gold prices going down significantly and crashing. So to an Indian, you look at it today. Today, gold is 54,000. How do you tell people don't buy gold?
The other aspect that has been also the fact that, how you have been initiated into the world of investment. Like, for example, we always had this uncle or aunt or somebody in the family who was probably an insurance agent and who came to us with ideas about future savings. And that's how we got initiated into the so-called money back policies in 90s and, earlier. That was basically, the intention was very noble to initiate you into the world of investment. But insurance really is not an investment; it's
Absolutely.
protection, right?
Absolutely, but again, it's a very peculiar thing. I mean, I'm as guilty, that in the first few years, at the end of the year, when it's not just an uncle and aunt, it was invariably the accountant in the office who was an insurance agent, who would tell you that you're not going to get your salary anymore because you haven't paid up the taxes, and so you are in a panic, and you say, "What do you do?" And you would say, "Buy a policy because you get a tax break." So a lot of insurance selling and the ability to sell you a money back policy saying you're at least getting your money back was a combination of taxation, tax planning, the fact that it was invariably an accountant, and that they could convince you to buy an insurance because you looked at it as nothing to lose. You save tax, you're not calculating any return, and you're not looking at the option. Of course, it was very foolish that all of us should have just taken a simple term insurance and not looked at money back policies. But those were the days when, like I said, most of our money would go into EMI for the home loan, and it was foolishly done. It was mis-selling. You had no alternatives. There was only LIC and GIC. And when things opened up, the rash of mis-selling that happened in the form of unit-linked insurance, frankly, I think that has done a lot to drive people away. So our first challenge as people who are into financial literacy is to be able to convince people that, look, insurance is not investment, keep the two separate, right? And you have a lot of people, Indians don't buy insurance, the numbers are very low, as you know. The second challenge was, even when this market could have grown, the industry is responsible for the mis-selling, right? So they decimated people's savings, and even there, people didn't notice it because of the tax breaks. Okay, so a lot of people were under the mistaken impression it doesn't matter what I'm paying because I get a tax break on it. You're getting a partial tax break for sure, but that is one of the reasons why people were careless about looking at what the returns are, and their savings were really decimated. The industry has itself to blame, and the fact that we have a poor regulator and poor supervision.
But that also brings us to the issue of financial advice and how professional financial advice is given out in this country. There is absolutely no oversight on who is advising who on what products. And essentially what we have is multiplicity of regulation, where if somebody is a financial advisor and he advises or she advises on mutual funds, he and she is also going to advise you on fixed deposits, which are not regulated by SEBI. They are not a security under the Securities Contract Act. So the multiplicity of regulations is again a problem, isn't it? Because insurance again is not under SEBI's domain. So who really regulates financial advice in this country?
So it's quite simple. It's not even just multiplicity of regulation. Our problem is we have too many regulators. Okay, because regulators were set up not because people needed them, but because IAS officers post-retirement needed a sinecure. And since SEBI worked as wonderfully well as the first regulator, you just decided that you will have a regulator for everything, because the minute you finished your term as petroleum secretary, you want to be a petroleum regulator, and you're creating that body, or you're creating another institution to learn how to give financial advice and certification. We spend so much of national resources on this complete nonsense, while the one thing we will not do is to punish people for mis-selling. So it's not a question of regulation. We have too much regulation, too many acts, too many regulators. I mean, in less than 15 years, we are now looking at consolidating all of that. Where is the pressure coming from not to consolidate all regulators into one? Again, from the bureaucracy, because they don't want to, miss these wonderful fiefdoms that they have created and the SEBI bhavans. They don't want to be together. You had a high-level committee where all the regulators had to sit at the table with the RBI governor with the finance secretary. Why the hell isn't it working? Why are their egos more important than national interest and investor interest? And you have created a judicial system where people like you and me, if we want to agitate it, we want to take it to court, we want to get these damn guys punished for not doing their job and sleeping on their job, there is nothing we can do because A, courts don't first understand. You go to court, your first response is that A, you'll have the Solicitor General and the Attorney General coming on behalf of these regulators who are not doing their job. So it's an uneven field, and you have the court saying they know best because they're overawed by who's appearing on the other side. It is such an unfair battle, and I'm not even coming to the fact that any case takes 10 years and is too expensive and it's too slow to have any meaning. Why is it the things like, look at Satyam being the greatest example, where investors in the US got compensated and investors in India, this is an Indian company, got nothing. And I don't even think Mr. Ramalinga Raju paid the price. So if you tell me in my last 33 years of journalism, I can't show 5 examples where a regulator has actually punished people, then what are we talking about? Look at the Ketan Parekh scam. Every corporate house that was involved got away with a warning, which is why the same people are up to mischief, this time in collusion with mutual funds. What is SEBI doing about, for instance, the Z Group or Rana Kapoor or Anil Ambani? Nothing, right? So my point is, it's not about regulations, it's not about number of regulators, it is about the lack of supervisory action. And if the supervisors and regulators are not going to be judged by action taken, things actually resolved, not closed. Big difference, okay? They should be sacked. There has to be action against them. I can't hear you.
Essentially, we are looking at a sort of a regulatory confusion out there on financial advice. We really don't have anyone really keeping an oversight on them, and people will continue to get misled into the world into the investment world, isn't it?
Absolutely, and look at how dangerous the situation is today and how explosive. Okay, so finally, what you do, you're scared about what to do, so you burnt your fingers in mutual funds not once but twice. It happened in 2008 as well with some mutual funds. It's happening again. So what do? You get worried and you say, I'll keep my money in a bank. Now the government is mucking around with banks. There is a complete mess about the manner in which public sector banks are being merged or what is happening. People are being transferred. So we don't know what's going on there. It's money from the exchequer. You have private banks. I remember that there was some little confusion about 3 weeks ago about how S&P worded its press release on Axis Bank's rating. And we had urgent calls from people, including lawyers, saying, what's going on with Axis Bank? And we have our accounts in Axis Bank. And our first reaction also was not to say, oh, don't worry, I'm looking at those numbers. But when you've had a Satyam, when you had a CCD, where somebody can just get up and say, oh, those numbers for the past 10 years were all rubbish. So even our immediate reaction was to panic and to start looking at what's going on. So you have created this huge question mark where private banks are concerned. You're creating a complete scare by talking about bailing in using depositors' money. The reason why people are putting their money in savings bank accounts, in public sector banks, is not because they're stupid. We ask this question every time. You know that the returns don't even beat inflation, which means that the value of your money is reducing over time, and people will come back and say, yes, I know it, but I want to at least keep my principal safe and get a little more. So most people are never going to retire because they're going to keep trying to work to make up that little difference, because you don't have a system where you can say, okay, keep my money safe. Tell me where it's going to be safe. Mutual funds, for instance. I mean, are they not responsible? Who allowed them to become lenders? And when you found that they had turned lenders to promoters, they colluded with them to hide this from stock exchanges. What has SEBI done? You have a chairman who's retiring now. What has he done in his 3 years? Are we asking him that question? Why is the buck not stopping at one individual with us saying, hey, before you go and take your pension, please tell me what action have you taken? Nothing has happened about people who have lost money in 81 bonds. I mean, even here, why is it a few thousand investors who are jumping around? I have published documents which are letters from relationship managers to say this is safer than a fixed deposit. Please convert your fixed deposit because you're locking yourself in for 5 years at a 9% interest. Nothing can be safer than this. You had the money as an FD, you converted it, and RBI writes it off overnight. This is, I keep saying, it's like the migrant workers. We didn't know that migrant workers was a 14 crore problem. Similarly, when they wrote off those 81 bonds in Yes Bank, I don't think the RBI and the deputy governor, who I'm told asked for this, had a clue what it's going to do to retail investors, or that there were relationship managers mis-selling, or that it's going to cheat depositors. You can't go on like this. You can't even go on with this zombie banks thing, which I'm repeatedly writing about, like PMC Bank. We've been asking them. You have all kinds of ego issues because guys whose pension is inflation linked, who are never going to pay a price, whose health is taken care of by the exchequer in India, why are they concerned about people like you and me who are purely private sector? And when we lose a chunk of our savings, it's never coming back. They're not in the same boat as us. They have to be in the same boat as us. Then they can understand the pain of what happens when your savings are decimated.
We have absolutely exceeded our time, Sucheta. Thank you so much, and it was wonderful talking to you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for joining
Thanks.
us.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye bye.